This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario. Hi everyone, it is Rebecca, and today I am speaking with Canadian author Lucy E.M. Black. Lucy is a Canada-based writer and an educator. The stories of the young people whom she has worked with have shaped her professional life as well as that of her storytelling. Lucy studied creative writing at the undergraduate level and later earned her master's degree in 19th century British fiction. She has also been a student at the Sage Hill School of Writing and the Humber College School of Writing. Lucy received the Writer of Distinction Award from Humber College for her manuscript on the plight of Irish immigrants in 1870s Ontario. As many of you know, I have read and highly recommended 4 of Lucy's books, The Brickworks, Eleanor Curtin, Stella's Carpet, and now her latest, A Quilting of Scars, which we will be talking about today. Lucy, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm so happy to have this chat.
Great. And I will let everybody know that back in September of 23, Lucy and I talked about her book, The Brickworks, which I read and loved, and then Tara also read and loved. And if you haven't yet read it, make sure go out and get a copy. It is a fantastic story, truly about two men and the brotherhood and relationship they develop in Ontario during a time period that is historical fiction and really a compelling story. But we're going to talk about A Quilting of Scars today. So, Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about your latest novel?
So, A Quilting of Scars is a story of a farmer named Larkin. And the entire story unfolds during the course of one long night for Larkin in his house as he's recalling things that happened to him in his youth and how they influenced his life. Larkin considers himself a keeper of secrets. And the fact that he has this burden of secrets has really overshadowed his life. And he's thinking about the events that led up to those things and the decisions that he made. There was a fire in his community. He lives in a little place called Cemetery Hill, and a farm, a neighboring farm burned down. All the animals perished, and 2 men perished in the house. When the coroner examined the men, he realized that they had been stabbed prior to the fire, and the fire had been set to cover this up. And Larkin knows what really happened the night of that fire, but he keeps that secret to himself. And so that secret, along with a whole series of other secrets, really change the trajectory of Larkin's life. And he lives a quite solitary existence. He breeds beautiful horses, and they're his closest companions.
Yeah, and I want to say that we all, as readers, come across literary characters who live with us forever. So one of my all-time favorites is Owen Meany, A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. I've never forgotten Owen since I read it, like, I don't know, 40 years ago. And I just want to tell you sincerely that Larkin is one of those characters. He is amazing. And I just felt his pain and his solitariness. It was just so palpable in reading this novel. It's incredible. So I just want to mention that you dedicated the novel to the Larkins of this world. And I thought, could you explain the dedication?
Yes. As you know, Rebecca, I was an educator for a number of years. I was a high school principal. And during my career, I had a number of young people struggling with their sexuality, young people who felt that they were born in the wrong bodies. And unfortunately, for many of those young people, when they shared their questions about their sexuality or their identity with their families, they were shunned and rejected, and many of them were asked to leave the family home. So, as a result, as an administrator, I had a number of these young people couch surfing with friends, living in neighborhood parks, and then had to work really hard with social services to find them more sustainable living arrangements. And it broke my heart. It truly broke my heart to think that these beautiful young people who were so vulnerable were rejected by the people who should have loved them unconditionally. And to me, that is Larkin. Larkin isn't sure about his own sexuality. I'm not saying that Larkin was gay. I'm not sure that I have the right to write a gay character. But he had questions about his own sexuality and about his relationships with his closest friend. And that really impacted him. And he had to keep that a secret because of the times in which he lived, where homosexuality was not only considered a sin, but it was considered illegal. And one of the things that I'm aware of in Ontario is that Victorian morals, or social mores, if you will, have been very slow to change.
Mm.
So, we have progressivist ideology where science and technology and all things are possible, that came at the tail end of the Victorian period. But the Victorian ideology, the social mores were much, much slower to change here in Ontario. I think they're changing now. I think people are more accepting now. But certainly during the course of my career, young people who disclosed that they were gay or had questions about their sexuality were not dealt with very kindly. And I felt very strongly that the church perpetuated that in many, many instances. Hence, the minister that you will have read about in A Quilting of Scars. And although this is historical fiction, I think many of those same issues came forward with us into current practice. And I wanted to highlight just this beautiful, beautiful young man, Larkin, and the burden that he carried with him. And so the book is dedicated to any Larkins that are out there, any young people who feel that they can't speak their truth or live their truth and still be accepted and loved unconditionally.
And I would even say that's so beautiful the way you said that, but I would also say that for young people who aren't even just sure, that just have questions that they can't answer yet because maybe they need more life experience or they need to be in a different setting so that they can explore. Because even when you said that about Larkin, that you're not speaking directly to his homosexuality if he was, that's kind of how I felt. There were times in the book where I felt like, I feel like I'm getting close to Larkin. I'm starting to understand who he is. And then I sort of felt like, oh, wait a minute. Now I feel like he's a little bit, he's backing off and letting me know where he is. You know what I mean? So by the end of the book, I thought, I don't know who he was specifically. And it didn't matter because he was trying to figure it all out. And maybe he just wasn't able to completely either know what who he was, or that he could even share it with us as readers. I don't know if that's true if you meant it that way, but that's kind of how I felt.
Well, it's exactly what I intended because Larkin has a very close, loving relationship with his parents. And near the end of the book, we suspect that his parents have figured this out, but he doesn't share it with them. Not because he's afraid of being rejected by them, but because he's afraid of hurting them, afraid that if word gets out in the community, his parents will also have to pay a price.
Yeah.
And so he can't even share, these questions with these people who really love him.
Yeah.
And I think that's sad.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I just want to say for everyone who's listening to this that it is a heart-wrenching story, but it is so beautiful. And one of the things I'll talk about this in a minute here because I want to ask this next question and then I'll talk about the historical aspects of the story. But I feel like you probably have already answered this question, but when I read it, I thought it's a character study, but it's also very plot driven. So then I wondered what came first for you as in writing this novel? Was it really the characters that spoke to you first, or were you thinking of this plot of this murder? Like, what came first, chicken or the egg, I guess?
What came first was a poster. And I was in an antique store with my husband, and there was this poster. It's behind me. I don't think you can see it. For the splendid horse, young Netherby. And it's a reproduction poster from the 1860s where a farmer had this beautiful stallion that he was taking out to stud at various stables around the community for $4 a leap. But if you paid $8, you were guaranteed a foal. And I fell in love with this poster, Rebecca, but it was really expensive. And we went back to this antique store about 3 times. The third time we finally bought it because I was just so intrigued by this poster and by a farmer in this time period in Ontario that was charging money. $4, a leap is a substantial amount of money in the
Yeah,
1860s. I was intrigued by this farmer because in Ontario, in the time period, most farmers were crop farmers. We were growing tobacco and we were growing potatoes. We were growing crop. And
yeah.
to have this farmer who was advertising this splendid horse just really intrigued me. So I did a deep dive into the research of farming in the period. And Larkin came to me and he was almost fully formed
Wow.
and told me his story. And it just unfolded from there. So it was a poster, and then it was Larkin, and then it was the story.
Wow. Okay. I love hearing that because that is something when you walked in there, never were you imagining that you were gonna look at something that was going to be your next novel, right? That you this just spoke to
No,
you in the moment that you saw it. Wow.
yeah, but, I mean, it was a deadly expensive poster.
Yeah, except
Not
that
something my husband was happy about, I've got to tell you.
however, it turned into a book, and so maybe, maybe he'll excuse that cost,
Oh, yeah,
now.
it's
Yeah.
in my writing room. I wish I'll actually send you a JPEG after our interview.
Okay, that would be fantastic. So, one of the things that I've talked about you so many times, your ears should burn every time I talk about you on this
Oh,
podcast,
bless you.
but I do because I've loved all of your books that I've read so far, and I still have 2 more to go that I own, and I have 2 more to go. But one of the things that I love about your writing is your historical fiction feels like you've written it in the time period in which it is set. And I don't know how you do that because you make the dialogue authentic. You use a turn of phrase, you use words that are not words we would use today. And then I think to myself, how in the world do you create that time period for us as readers, and it is so authentic and it feels like magic to me. I just can't even imagine how you do it. And I'm being really sincere when I say it because I've read, enough historical fiction where sometimes I feel like it's historical setting, but it's feels very modern in the language and the setting. And so how do you make it so authentic?
Well, I love the 19th century, and that was my academic area of interest. So that gave me a really good foundation for a lot of what took place in the 19th century. But I collect letters and diaries from the period, and I create lexicons from those documents with turns of phrases and expressions that people would have used in the period. And I develop a lexicon for each of my characters. And I basically build them a little vocabulary set. And I work with that. And then during the editing process, I I do a lot of drafts when I'm editing. And what I spend a lot of time doing are language edits. So I will use find and replace in Word, and I'll say, or find Larkin, and I'll go through the manuscript. And every time Larkin speaks in the manuscript, I will check the language to make
Oh.
sure that it's consistent. And then I'll do find and replace Polly. And I'll go through the whole manuscript again, just checking Polly's language. And then for his dad, and then for his mom, and then for the lawyers. So those language edits, that smoothing of the language is something that I pay a lot of attention to, because I think that when you can hear the character, they become very three-dimensional. And I
Hmm.
really want the voices to be as authentic as I can make them. Now, having said that, I know that they're not like 100% authentic, but I hope they give that strong flavor.
Oh, they do. They absolutely do. And they did it in the brickworks as well. I really felt like, again, I was transported into that time period, into that setting. That was amazing. And Eleanor Curtin as well. I mean, all of your books, I have felt that way so strongly. Now, when you do your research, okay, since you're kind of your academic background is in 19th century. So, do you feel like how much research do you end up doing for one of your novels, or do you feel like you've got this really strong background, or how in the world do you craft your research when you're writing a novel?
I do a ton of research, and far more research than I can cram into a book typically.
Mhm.
So for this story, for Larkin's story, I know something about Ontario farming. We had a small Ontario farm. My husband's people come from, Ontario farm country. But I didn't know how they castrated animals. I didn't know how they bred stallions. I didn't know how they dehorned cattle. I didn't know what a cattle drive looked like. So I had to do deep dives for some of those things and find firsthand accounts of those things that I could draw upon. But just so much research, and it's very exciting. I love doing the research. I go down these rabbit holes, but then I end up with far more material than I could use. And so then it's a matter of giving readers enough to give them a taste or a flavor without overwhelming them with my research.
Yeah. And then are you doing your research, is it primarily online, or are you going into archives, into libraries? Are you doing that as well?
Actually, when I started writing Eleanor, for instance, my first historical fiction novel, I spent a lot of time going to libraries and doing research that way. But then, COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, that completely changed how I had to work.
Mhm.
And so I've learned how to do a lot more research online. And I still go to libraries,
Mhm.
but I also order very specific books. But at this point in time, I've amassed quite a useful library of resources
Mhm.
that I can draw on. Things like the Victorian country house and the rise and fall of the Victorian servant, and just all
Yeah.
sorts of idiosyncratic materials that are resources for me that I can draw upon.
Mhm. Wow. Well, keep doing what you're doing because it's working really well, and I know everybody out there who's either read you already or who should read you, and we're gonna really push that message, they will also agree with what I'm saying because like I said, you just feel immersed in the world you create, and it's a really wonderful place to be in as a reader, so I just love that,
Oh, thank you.
so now I'm going to ask you one of our favorite things we like to do. We love to ask authors what you are reading, what you're currently reading or something that you've read that you'd like to recommend to our readers because we all grow our TBRs just obsessively. So anything you'd like to mention?
Yeah. Um, I think two things that I'd like to mention. A book I finished a couple of weeks ago was written by a Canadian writer, Bruce Hunter, and it's called In the Bear's House. And It is one of the most beautiful Canadian books I have ever read. I think it belongs in the Canadian canon.
Wow.
It is
Okay.
about a young boy growing up after the World War in the Depression in the prairies with his family, and he's born deaf, and how his family advocates for him so that he doesn't have to go to a special school, and the things they do to surround him with other kinds of sensory experiences, and the way that they love him unconditionally and provide him with really rich experiences. So it's a coming of age story for this young boy, but it's also a story of somebody learning to live with what we would call a disability
Hmm.
and turning it into a strength. But Bruce Hunter, in addition to being a novelist and an academic, is a poet. And the writing in this book is so beautiful that you have to savor it. I demonstrated to my husband, I would open the book at random and put my finger down and read a line, and it was poetic language. It was just beautiful. And you can
Wow.
do that on any page in the book. It is absolutely mesmerizing. It's a book to be savored. I just can't recommend it highly enough. So,
Yeah.
In the Bear's
Okay.
House by Bruce Hunter.
Okay. Thank you.
I just, I think you'd enjoy talking to him. The book that I've just started reading is historical fiction, and it's by Joanne Cully, Culley. It's called Kate and the Composers, and I haven't finished reading it yet. But it's about an Irish family who leaves Ireland in the late 1880s and come to Canada in search of a better life. And they come to Toronto. They end up in Cabbagetown. And lo and behold, they are terribly discriminated. There are signs everywhere in Toronto, Irish need not apply.
Hmm.
And they really, really struggle to make a living. But they are related to a man who is a very famous composer. And so the book is filled with music and filled with stories about music and about this young girl who is Irish, who's been put into service because the family need every cent they can gather to scrape together a living, and how she comes of age in the story. And it's just mesmerizing. I think this is Joanne's third historical fiction. But the interesting thing is that it began for her with a set of musical scores that she found belonged, I believe, to her grandfather. And she has done a huge amount of research and put this together, and it's really quite good.
Okay. These are 100% both of them going on my TBR. They sound phenomenal. Oh, yeah. 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 Wow. Thank you.
Well, you have to let me know once you've read Bruce's book.
Oh, I
It,
will.
it's
Yeah.
not a fast read, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Like you can read a few pages and then you have to breathe deeply.
Hmm.
It's a book to be savored.
That might be a good book to read for me right now, actually, where I've got time to really and to let it sink in as well, just to have that time to just let it sink in. It sounds like wow. Okay, this is the question I often feel so guilty about asking authors after they've just published a book. But my question is, are you currently working on anything that is coming out like in a couple of years that we can look forward to as well?
Oh, I'm always writing, Rebecca.
Good, 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 good.
So I have a book under contract for spring 2027.
Okay,
And Now or Never is publishing it. And it's
great.
called The Mural. And The Mural is it takes place in Toronto, 1980s. So it's historical fiction, but not 19th century historical fiction.
Hmm.
And it's about a young girl and her widowed mother living in Toronto and her coming of age. And she works as a model part-time and falls in love with a painter who is using her for a mural he is painting for an art center. And she she completely falls in love with him. He disappears, and she really, really mourns the great love of her life. And eventually, she marries a man on the rebound, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and they struggle to build a life together. He has an interfering mother-in-law. There's some health challenges, and there's some really sad fertility issues. But through the novel, she falls in love, deeply in love with this man, and realizes there's this huge difference between the feelings that she had for the painter and the love, the deep love that she has for the man that she married. And so it's really all about sort of mediated messages of romance
Wow.
and how we really, really impress upon young people sort of the romance of the Cinderella wedding and the fairy tale. But we don't talk about the hard work and the commitment that goes into a deep and loving long term relationship, and that it's hard work. And I wanted to explore that. And so that's the mural. So it's
Okay.
coming out spring 2027. The book that I'm working on right now is a sequel to Eleanor Curtin. I've finished the manuscript.
I'm
I've
so
done about
excited. Sorry, I'm so excited.
I've done about 13 drafts so far. It's
Yeah.
finished. I'm just doing some final polishing, and then I have to find an editor, or not an editor, a publisher for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called Kathleen McDonough, and it's about the little girl that Dr. Stewart and Eleanor adopted, and it's her story as she turns 16 and comes into her inheritance in Ireland. And Eleanor takes her to Ireland to introduce her to her Irish family and show her the estate that she has inherited.
Oh my gosh. Oh
So
my
it's
gosh.
quite fun. I think you'll like it.
I already know I will love it. And actually, the mural sounds amazing as well because it's interesting. It's one of the reasons why I back in the day I was a big romance reader when I was much younger, and as I've gotten older and I recognize that the world is not quite the way it is in a romance novel, I appreciate the theme of the mural, and I think it's going to be exactly what I will love reading because I do think that we kind of get that wrong a little bit. And when we're young, we're told one thing, and then the hard work that it takes to stay in a long term relationship.
Well, and again, Rebecca, I'll just say this comes out of my work in high schools,
Hmm.
where suddenly at the end of my career, we have these things called promposals. I don't know if you have them in the
Yeah,
States or
we
not,
do. Hmm.
but these boys are put under incredible pressure to, have a dozen long-stemmed red roses and candles and red petals and to engineer all their friends for a great big showy, will you come to the prom with me? I mean, he's spending $100 just to invite her to a dance. Like, really? And
Yeah,
then the night of prom itself, they've got to have spray tans and hair and makeup and nails. And then they have to post their prom dresses online so nobody else has the same dress.
yeah.
And it just becomes so expensive and so elaborate. And it has nothing, nothing to do with, having a fun night.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
all about appearances. And again, it comes back to that whole thing about mediated messages of romance. It
yeah.
just
Well,
puts people under pressure.
yeah, it's very performative, and I see that not yeah, I'm glad you brought up the promposals because I'd kind of forgotten about that because I see it too, especially with social media, all the engagements and the weddings and even like in weddings, they do dance sequences now, and I think, I'm coming for a wedding. I don't want to be performed for. Like that just blows my mind that
I know.
it's all performative and then the marriages don't last. And then you think, I think we're sending the wrong message. It's like, how do we make strong relationships and marriages last? And all this other stuff is just, I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah. So the mural sounds fantastic. I really think it's going to speak to that. It sounds like,
Well, I hope so. I hope
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
It was a real work of love, to tell you the truth.
Hmm.
And I think there's some funny bits in it, just enough to sort of balance out the sad stuff. But it was hard to convince a publisher. I mean, Now or Never has been very good to me, and they took it right away. But I did explore with some romance publishers, and they wouldn't touch it.
What about now with the sequel to Eleanor Curtin? I know that the publisher, I think whoever published that is no longer in business, correct?
Seraphim Publishing is out
Yeah.
of business. That's correct.
Okay. So then how difficult, I assume it's going to be very difficult then to find a publisher for a sequel to a book that they didn't publish initially, right? Is that
Yeah. So I've
what's,
written the book so that it's a standalone.
oh,
So
okay.
you can read it without having read Eleanor.
Hmm.
But again, it doesn't fit what publishers would think of as a historical fiction slash romance, or a historical romance, because there's actually a third book in my head. And
I'm sorry, I was excited.
so there, Kathleen's very happy. The family's very happy at the end of the book. But we don't see Kathleen, getting married and living happily ever after at that point yet.
Hmm.
So romance publishers wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
And, we have a number of fabulous small Canadian independent presses here in this country,
Hmm.
but they don't tend to publish a lot of pure historical fiction. So
Mm.
they if it's historical fiction and there's a strong political component to it, that would be an easier sell than this. So I'm not sure who I'm going to be able to convince to publish it, but I'm hoping it finds a publisher.
Oh my gosh. Same here, because one of the things I love about Eleanor Curtin as a novel is I always tell people, because I own multiple copies and I loan them out when I can, but it's so funny because I'm not a romance reader, but the romance in it is, oh, I loved it. I thought it was so amazing. I loved it. But then there's that whole, what I always tell people is there's this great romance, but there's also this community that Eleanor develops that I loved every character, all the interactions with all the characters, even the sort of some of the backstories I really loved. And so to me, it's just this amazing historical community story that has an awesome romance to it. And that to me was exciting because it made me remember what I loved about reading romances, but in the way that I want to read them now, which is that it was realistic. It felt very realistic and I loved it. So, and it's okay for them to live happily ever after if they did, because everything else was so authentic. So that's what I loved about it so much.
Well, thank you. I love those characters too, and they're still walking around in my head, like Harry McClenaghan. I mean, he's there.
I love it. I love it. Well, Lucy, I can't thank you enough for coming back again and talking about A Quilting of Scars. I want to really encourage everyone to pick up a copy. We're going to have in the show notes a link to now, what is it? Now or Never
Yes,
Publishing,
yes.
non-publishing. We'll have a link to that, as well as Lucy has some discussion questions on her website, which I'm going to link to that as well. So that after you've read the book, I always like to go back and look at the questions afterward. They're really great questions. And I just want to thank you for coming back and joining us. And then hoping that when the mural comes out and the next book comes out and the next book, that you'll come back again.
I'm always happy to speak with you, Rebecca. Thank you so much for your support.
Oh, you're very welcome. And as we always say, happy reading, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.